The sun rose over Lake Serenity as it had for 1,000 years, a slow, gentle burn that turned the still water into a mirror of liquid gold. For Daniel Thorne, this was the best time of day. The air was cool, the only sounds the distant call of a loon and the soft lapping of water against his old wooden dock. His cabin, built by his great-grandfather in the 1920s, was a simple, rustic structure of dark logs and a moss-covered roof. It wasn't a showpiece, but a home, a living testament to a family's quiet legacy. While other cabins on the shore had been torn down and replaced with sprawling glass and steel modern chalets, Daniel's remained a stubborn and beloved relic. The lake was more than just a body of water to him. It was a part of his family's history, a place etched into his very soul. His family hadn't just settled on the lake, they had owned it. The original land grant, a hand-drawn map with spidery ink lines and an official seal, wasn't just for the cabin's 5 acres. It was for the entire lake bed, from the northernmost inlet to the southern dam, and for a generous 50-foot buffer of shoreline around its entire circumference. His great-grandfather, a man who believed in self-sufficiency and an abundance of caution, had bought the lake and the land it rested on, ensuring that no one could ever fence off his paradise. Over the decades, as land was sold off for smaller, individual lots, the Thorne family had kept a very specific and very important part of the deed: the lake itself. This detail, buried deep in old county records, was a fact known only to Daniel, his family lawyer, and a few of the older locals who remembered the Thornes as the owners of Serenity. Then came the new money. It arrived in the form of a real estate development called the Serenity Point Residences. It promised luxury living, private boat slips, and a serene, exclusive community. The new residents built their homes right up to the shoreline, massive structures that blocked out the morning sun and dwarfed Daniel's humble cabin. Daniel, a man who valued peace over profit, had tolerated their presence. He understood that progress was inevitable. As long as they didn't bother him, he wouldn't bother them. But the one who bothered him was Brenda. Brenda was a woman in her late 50s, with a perfectly coiffed blonde bob and a perpetual look of disapproval etched onto her face. She had bought the biggest house on the lake, a multi-story monstrosity with more windows than a city office building. She was the self-appointed queen of the new community, the self-proclaimed leader of a fledgling homeowners association, and an expert in making other people feel small. She had a habit of gliding around the lake in her brand-new pontoon boat, a floating throne from which she would survey her kingdom. She called everyone honey in a voice so saccharine it was menacing. The first incident was minor. Daniel was fishing for bass in his favorite spot, a quiet cove where the water was deep and the fish were plentiful. He was in his grandfather's old wooden boat, a craft as old as the cabin itself, its peeling paint a testament to a lifetime of memories. Brenda's pontoon pulled up beside him. "Honey, you can't fish here," she said, her voice carrying across the water. Daniel looked up, confused. "I've been fishing here for 50 years, ma'am." "Well, darling, this is a private cove for the residents of Serenity Point. We're going to be putting in some docks here soon. We need to keep it clear of boats like yours." She gestured dismissively at his vessel. Daniel, a calm and patient man, didn't argue. He simply smiled, tipped his old worn-out hat, and motored to another spot. He had no desire to cause a scene. He figured it was just a misunderstanding, a case of new people not knowing the lay of the land, or, in this case, the water. But the encounters escalated. Brenda started a campaign. She and her newfound allies would speed by Daniel's cabin on their jet skis, creating a wake that would rock his boat and slap against his dock. They complained about the sound of his old motor. They even accused him of polluting the lake with the faint smell of his two-stroke engine. Daniel, for the most part, ignored them. But the constant harassment was beginning to chip away at his peace. The final straw came on a crisp Saturday morning. Daniel was out on the lake, his boat packed with fishing gear and a picnic basket. He was heading for his favorite island, a small, rocky outcropping in the middle of the lake where he loved to spend his afternoons. As he approached, he saw Brenda and her husband Rick on the island's small shore. They had a large ornate sign in their hands. "What are you doing?" Daniel asked as he pulled his boat closer. Brenda straightened up, a look of triumph on her face. The sign was a masterpiece of entitlement. A polished slab of redwood with engraved lettering that read, "Private property. Serenity Point residents only. No trespassing. We're designating this island as a private picnic spot, honey," Brenda said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "It's in the new bylaws we've drafted. We're just trying to keep the lake exclusive. You know?" Daniel stared at the sign, then at Brenda. The peaceful calm he held so dear began to crack. "You can't do that," he said, his voice low and strained. "Oh, but we can, darling," Brenda retorted, her eyes gleaming with condescension. "This island is part of the Serenity Point development. We own it, and we can do what we want with it. Now, if you would kindly take your vessel and go back to your cabin, we'd all appreciate it." Daniel's blood ran cold. He felt a deep, profound anger. This wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. This was a deliberate attempt to seize what was his, to deny him access to the very heart of his life. He looked from the sign to Brenda's smug face. "This island, and the water it sits in, is mine," he said, his voice flat. Brenda laughed, a shrill, unpleasant sound that echoed across the lake. "Don't be ridiculous, honey. You own that dilapidated shack on the shore, not the entire lake. The deeds are clear. This is our property. Are you certain about that?" Daniel asked, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. "Are you very, very certain?" The look of smug superiority on Brenda's face wavered for a second. She and her husband had paid an exorbitant sum for their home, and the real estate agent had assured them that the entire lake, and all its features, were a part of the community property. This old man's ridiculous claim felt like a personal insult to her investment. "Listen, honey," she said, her voice losing its sweetness and gaining a hard edge. "We don't want to cause any trouble, but you are a distraction. We will be installing a buoy line in a few days to mark off the private section of the lake. I've already sent a formal notice to your cabin. If you cross it, we will have you fined and your boat towed." Daniel said nothing. He simply turned his boat around and headed back to his cabin, his mind racing. The fire that had been smoldering in his gut was now a full-blown inferno. They were threatening him. They were trying to take his home, his peace, his heritage. The next day, a certified letter arrived. The envelope was thick and official-looking, with a return address from the Serenity Point Residences Association. The letter was a formal notice of trespass. It stated that Daniel Thorne was hereby banned from all common property of the Serenity Point community, effective immediately. It listed the private cove, the island, and a long list of other sections of the lake. It concluded with a threat of legal action and fines if he did not comply. The letter was signed by Brenda Sterling, chairwoman, SPAA. Daniel didn't panic. He picked up the phone and called his lawyer, a man named Marcus who had been a family friend for decades. Marcus was old, sharp, and had a deep, rumbling laugh that could shake a room. He laughed now, a long, hearty guffaw that made the phone crackle. "Daniel," he said, wiping a tear from his eye. "You're telling me this woman, this Brenda, is trying to ban you from your own lake?" "She's serious, Marcus," Daniel said. "She's got a fake association and a sign on the island. She's threatening to have me fined." "Daniel, my boy," Marcus said, his voice now serious. "Do you still have the original deed to the land, the one with the hand-drawn map?" "It's in the safe," Daniel said, "just as great-grandfather left it." "Good," Marcus said. "Don't you worry about a thing. You get that deed, and you bring it to my office. We're going to have a little fun with this." Daniel spent the rest of the week quietly preparing. He went fishing in his boat, but stayed close to his dock, a silent act of protest. He watched from his porch as Brenda's little flotilla of pontoon boats, jet skis, and speedboats zipped around the lake, their occupants oblivious to the legal storm that was about to break over their heads. He saw the brightly colored buoys they had placed around the private sections, acting as an invisible fence. He even saw a couple of new residents, a younger couple with a child, fishing near his dock, an act that just a few weeks ago would have been unthinkable. They looked uncomfortable and out of place, as if they knew they were intruding. On Friday afternoon, Daniel drove to Marcus's office with the deed. Marcus was waiting for him, a wry smile on his face. He had already pulled the public records and verified everything. He had even drafted a legal document. "Daniel, the deed is a masterpiece," Marcus said, sliding the old yellowing document across his desk. "Your great-grandfather, a man of profound foresight, had a vision. He didn't just buy the land up to the high water mark. He bought the entire lake bed, and a 50-foot buffer of shoreline all the way around. These Serenity Point folks, they own the land their houses are on, but they don't own a single inch of the lake. They don't own the docks. They don't own the water. They don't own the islands. They are essentially renting lake access from you, whether they realize it or not." Daniel felt a profound sense of relief and a quiet sense of triumph. The feeling was exhilarating. They had bought their luxury homes, their million-dollar views, but they had forgotten to check the one document that mattered most. They had built their gilded cages on his land, and now they were trapped. Marcus continued, a twinkle in his eye. "Now, we could sue them for trespassing. We could charge them rent. We could demand they remove their docks. We could even put up a fence around the lake and ban them completely. But that's not your style, is it?" "No," Daniel said. "I just want them to leave me alone. And I want Brenda to understand that her rules don't apply here." "Exactly," Marcus said. "So, here is what we are going to do. We're going to invite them to a meeting. You are going to tell them, very calmly and very politely, exactly what the situation is. And you are going to lay out a very simple choice for them. They can either continue to be a nuisance, in which case we take legal action, or they can start being good neighbors, in which case nothing changes." Daniel liked the plan. It was simple, elegant, and perfectly in character. It wasn't about revenge. It was about re-establishing peace. The meeting was set for the following Saturday at the new community clubhouse, a building as grand and impersonal as the homes around it. Brenda, under the impression that they were meeting to discuss Daniel's lack of cooperation, had a look of smug satisfaction on her face. She had gathered a dozen or so residents, all of them in expensive outdoor wear, their faces a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled disdain for Daniel and his old-fashioned ways. Brenda stood up as Daniel and Marcus entered. "Well, Daniel, I see you've brought your lawyer. I hope he's been able to explain the situation to you. The community has spoken. We want you to comply with the bylaws." Daniel didn't sit down. He stood in front of the room, Marcus at his side, holding a leather folder. "Brenda," Daniel said, his voice calm and steady. "There are no bylaws, not for this lake, and no community has a right to speak for it." Brenda's perfect composure began to crack. "What are you talking about?" she said, her voice a little higher than before. "We've all agreed on them." "You've all agreed on them, yes," Daniel said, "but they only apply to your land, not to the lake. You see, Brenda, a long time ago, my family bought this lake, all of it. The water you're standing near, the docks you built, the buoys you put out. It's all on our property. You don't own a single inch of the lake. Your property lines end 50 feet from the water's edge. You only have an easement for access. You are, in a very real way, my tenants." A profound, absolute silence fell over the room. The residents stared at Daniel, then at Brenda, their faces a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. They had paid millions of dollars for a lakeside lifestyle, only to find out that the lake itself didn't belong to them. Brenda, her face pale, sputtered, That's ridiculous. The real estate agent said we had access. He said the lake was a common area." "He was either mistaken, or he lied to you," Marcus said, his voice a low rumble. He pulled the deed from his folder and laid it on the table. The deed, signed in 1932, and all subsequent filings, clearly state that the Thorne family owns the lake bed. This is not a common area. It is private property. A murmur went through the room. The residents started to whisper, their faces turning from disbelief to betrayal. They had been sold a dream, only to find out it belonged to someone else. Brenda was furious. She pointed a trembling finger at Daniel. You tricked us. You let us move here and now you're going to hold us hostage." "I didn't trick anyone, Brenda," Daniel said, his voice still calm, but with an edge of steel. "I was here long before you were. I just wanted my peace. You are the one who tried to enforce your rules. You are the one who sent me a legal threat. You are the one who tried to ban me from my own property. I just responded in kind." The meeting descended into chaos. The residents started to argue amongst themselves, turning on Brenda. She was their leader, the one who had promised them an exclusive community, and now she was the one who had brought this humiliation upon them. They demanded to know why she hadn't checked the deeds. They wanted to know what would happen to their property values. Daniel waited for a few minutes, letting the storm rage. Then, he raised his hand. "I'm not here to fight with you," he said. "I'm here to offer a solution." He laid out his terms. He wasn't going to sue them for trespassing. He wasn't going to demand they tear down their docks. He wasn't even going to charge them a fee. All he asked for was respect. He asked them to take down their signs, to not harass him or his property, and to stop acting like they owned the lake. He was giving them a gift of continued access to the very thing they thought they owned. But he was doing so on his terms, with the understanding that the power dynamic was forever changed. Brenda was humiliated. She tried to rally support, but the residents, seeing the reality of their situation, just looked at her with resentment. They had to choose between fighting a man who could legally ban them from the lake at any time, and simply accepting his generous offer. They chose the latter. The next day, the buoys were gone, the sign on the island was taken down, and a collective quiet settled over the lake. Daniel was back on his boat, a few days later, fishing in his favorite cove. The silence was back. He saw Brenda's pontoon boat in the distance, but it didn't approach. He saw the new residents out on their jet skis and speedboats, but they steered clear of his cabin. He had one, not with anger or aggression, but with a quiet, unassailable truth. He hadn't bought the lake for money or for power. He had bought it for peace. And now, he had it back.